Well, hello. This is Suzanne Hannafin with Acumen Executive Search. And today I have Frank McShane with us. Frank is the owner of SquarePeg Consulting. And Frank and Acumen have worked together on multiple clients. And I think what makes Frank such a wonderful consultant is that not only has he been the CEO and COO of very large and small organizations, he started his career in human resources. And it's not often that you see an ops person that has such an emphasis on the people side. And so when we look at a whole organization, the people, the systems, the processes, Frank really comes in with that approach. It is the people first. So welcome, Frank. Is there anything you want to add to that introduction?
Well, thank you, Suzanne. It's great to be here with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Um, yeah, I think you hit it. It's kind of a well-rounded approach I try and take, where I consider the people, the process, the technology, all those pieces that need to come together for a company to operate productively.
Well,
So
and yeah, absolutely. And people don't get where they are in their career without really looking at some formative leadership experience that you've experienced.
you bet. Sure.
Yeah, tell us about, people or situations that really have shaped who you are.
Okay. Yeah, I was giving some thought. You sent me that question, so I was giving some thought to it. So, kind of chronologically, almost, you could say my first real leadership experience was a captain of the football team in high school, right? And so that's the first time you have to sort of step up in relation to your peers and take on a little bit different role. So that was very helpful. In college, I got to be president of my fraternity, another opportunity to kind of step up with your peers in a different role. And it was a great small academically oriented college, so we weren't the big partiers. We were kind of a balance of academics, sports, and fun. So that was a great experience. And then when I got into the work world, I got put into a couple of situations. I think sometimes you learn to be a leader in real time, when the situation calls for it. And one was really kind of a failure I learned from, which was the first time I was running a consulting project it was a small kind of boutique consulting firm I was working for, very what I call street fighting consulting, shop floor productivity improvement kind of stuff. And it was my first time running the project, and I was looking at the role as, getting everybody to get along and do what the client says, and be kind of kowtowing to the client, who was a big talking, loud, high ego kind of a individual CEO. And what he was trying to get us to do and the way he was treating us was wrong. He was leading things in the wrong direction, and he was belittling me and my team in front of his people. And I didn't really stand up and defend him enough and take that on, because I thought, again, my role was to, be the good, polite consultant, and do what I was told. And I got taken off that project because it was going in the wrong direction. And fortunately, my boss was, a good. He believed in me, and he really stepped in and said, look, here's what happened. Here's what went wrong. We can't do this again, right? You have to do what you believe is right, and you have to stand up for certain principles and the way of treating people, particularly our own team. And so that lesson really stuck with me, and I've kind of carried that forward into all my other experiences in leading those consulting teams, and it really helped get me into Ernst and Young in the supply chain practice there. And in that case, I was helping on a project where we were trying to take the nuclear plant, Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, into the open market for the first time. They'd always been a cost plus kind of environment, and the project leaders had left. They joined a different consulting firm and kind of left in the middle. And the partner in charge of that, he came to me and said, "I'd like you to take this one on." So I said, "Okay," and I'm up for this, not knowing that I really was or not, at that point in time. So I got kind of put into the fire in that particular case, and just took it on, and remembering those previous lessons and about doing what we think is right, keeping your eye on the goal that we're trying to accomplish with this group, and not so much be influenced by being liked and being looked up to. Just do the work and take things on and speak the truth about the issues and what's necessary to get there. And so that was a big leap for me. And
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Go on. I'm sorry, Frank.
so that's
Yeah.
fine. So from then on, I got into bigger and bigger projects, including the last consulting project I had, which was with Longview Fiber Paper and Packaging here in Longview, Washington, and that was a big transformation project. And in the towards the end of the project, the president recruited me to join the company, and I was ready to get off the road and stop being a consultant for a while, and so I did. Joined as VP of supply chain, and I had to put together an organization they'd never had before. All the supply chain pieces were all hammered out into other organizations, so we pulled people together, created something new. So that was a really good experience. And then he got caught up in the board action of trying to sell the business, and so he needed somebody to run the business on a day-to-day basis, and put me in the COO role. And then we went through the sale, and he moved on, so that he was my sponsor. But the new owners, identified me as the guy to lead the company after that, and so I took it on, and had to really, engineer a change in culture and mostly in results. We had not been making money very successfully over a number of years, and they were private equity guys, and they were looking for a definite positive return on their investment. And so that was a matter of really going through and reshaping the whole business, stem to stern, getting out of businesses that weren't successful and customers that weren't really generating cash, finding the things that the products and the customers that really were making the money, and making sure we focused in on those. So we went from about a $700 million business losing 70 million in EBITDA per year. We went to a $500 million business making 70 million in EBITDA a year. And it took about a year and a half to get to that point, but it was a pretty quick turnaround. And the investment banks had commented that that was one of the more dramatic and successful turnarounds they had ever seen. So that was a real learning experience for me, in terms of how all the levers you have to pull to transform a business, which was people, like you mentioned earlier. It's people, process, technology, strategy, picking your customers, picking your products, those kind of things, to be really careful about how you go about doing that, so that you end up with the results you're looking for.
No, this is fascinating, Frank, because there's a couple of things that you brought up. One was lessons learned with falling down.
Mhm.
And it's amazing to me how much we can learn from it if we are open to learning.
Mhm.
And then that changed a core value in you as a leader.
Mhm.
And then the other thing, a year and a half, holy cow, that is like lightning fast. That
Yeah.
is not just a quick turnaround. That is incredibly fast. So great job. And then, we talk about these values, and you mentioned again respect of your team, respect of who you are, being able to stand up. What other values do you bring that you hold dear to you to operationalize, whether it is in your current consulting business at Square Peg, or when you were the CEO of Longview Fiber?
Yeah. So I think the root value is for leaders is the willingness to take some risk, and and that includes with your people. So showing respect, you got to have mutual respect with each other for a team to be successful, and the leader to be successful. And you got to understand your success is dependent on the success of the team. That you don't go anywhere without them, right? But you got to show respect first, and then hopefully they'll earn it as well, and you will too, and there'll be mutual respect. But I think you got to take that risk up front. And the same thing with trust. I think you got to show some trust of people, and hopefully they'll move towards the trust as opposed to away from it, and take on more responsibility, take on some risk of their own and try and push the envelope in terms of how well they can perform and what's possible to do, what changes can be made, those kind of things, particularly in those types of situations where change is not an option. It's you must change, right? So, but how you change is open for debate, and so you need people to step forward and do that. So I think those two things, mutual respect and mutual trust, are absolutely essential. And it takes the leader to set that tone and take the first step, to show the respect, show the trust, and kind of model what that's supposed to look like.
Absolutely. And then when you're looking at hiring a team, because again, we take what we value, our values, and also our biases when we create a team. So what characteristics do you look for when you hire?
Yeah. Well, before I even think about the characteristics, I really think about the work itself, right? What is the work of the person or the team that you're trying to get done? And is it is it more task and technical kind of work, or is it more influencing people and guiding people? Is it more proactive kind of work? So we're got to be moving ahead, pushing ahead, doing new things, or is it more what I would call responsive work, where we've got the work is already structured. We just need people to be able to execute it really well. And then is it very structured or not? Is it, pretty clear? There's lots of policies and procedures, or there's not much there, no map to follow, right? So those are the first things I do in looking at the work. And that tells me what kind of people do I need who are going to, be successful at this. Because if your work is real task and technical and you get a bunch of people oriented types, they're going to struggle in that vein. Likewise, if it's really people-oriented work, leading and guiding and coaching, and they're very task and technically oriented, they're going to struggle in that. Even worse is if it's proactive work, so that you're solving problems, anticipating problems, removing roadblocks to the business. If that's really the task of the team, and you've got more responsive people who are kind of heads down, focused on their work, and they react to things really well, but they're not really aiming ahead very far, they're going to struggle. So you need to find that. So it's really the match of those things that the work requires. I think that's the most important part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your current consulting at SquarePeg, you work with many different size organizations, many different industries. If there was some advice that you would give a CEO, what advice would you offer?
Sure. Well, I think first is to think about, what's the real purpose of the business, right? And why are we here? Right? They need to really be able to encapsulate that and articulate that very clearly to everybody. So that gets everybody focused in the same direction. And then to really understand what are the parts of the business that generate cash and what are the parts of the business that don't generate cash. And you got to help people dig into that so you can figure it out. As we learned at Longview Fiber, we were doing a lot of things and serving all customers, all the same, a lot of products that weren't generating any return. And it was a different philosophy before the sale to the private equity group. So I'm not blaming anybody for that. It was different. So now the rules of the game changed. And in most businesses, that's the case. You got to generate cash to be a sustainable business. So really understanding what the moving parts are of the business that cause that to happen or take away cash from your end result. And then next is, really make sure you clearly articulate your expectations to each of your leaders in there. What is it they're responsible for? What is it their scope is? Who are they supposed to work together with? If the CEO or the leader in the group does that up front, it really saves a lot of time and effort in the long run and gets everybody aligned more quickly. And then if people don't follow that or don't respond, you got to address that quickly. You can't let, problem performance fester because it never gets better. It just will get worse and everybody else has to work harder. And now you're working around somebody. And whenever I see that we're all trying to adjust around somebody because they're not doing their job right, that's a problem and it's got to be addressed right away. And so that proactivity in the CEO is critical to identify issues, get them addressed quickly. It also sets the tone for the whole organization about how we deal with problems, how we identify problems, and how we deal with them quickly and effectively, and move on and keep going after our goal.
No, that makes total sense. And again, moving throughout the organization as you have, and seeing many different facets of it. Looking back in your career, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Yeah, yeah. Well, um, that's a great question. So I think it would be, first of all, uh, figure out how to get data as quickly as possible in any situation, right? So don't go with your gut all the time. I mean, sometimes that's necessary and it's important, and you got to trust your gut sometimes, but I prefer a well-informed gut decision as opposed to just a wild ass guess. And so that would be a key one. And then that lesson I learned early on about stand up for your principles, stand up for your people. I would have advised that early on, and don't just accept the input from the client, because you're there to help them, but sometimes helping them is telling them what they're doing wrong, and you got to get them to change, right? And sometimes they will, sometimes they don't. And so, but you got to take a stand and stand up for what you think is the right thing to do. So those are a couple of things I would advise myself early on.
Yeah, no, what great advice, both to the CEO and to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we do bring to with us every day these values and how we show up. And I think that is critical. Yeah, so this podcast is called Hiring for Good. So what does hiring for good mean to you?
Yeah. Well, when I hire people or I advise clients on hiring people, as you know, I use a tool called the predictive index, and so that's a piece. There's other tools out there that are also good ones that gives you insight into the person in terms of what to expect from them down the road, right? Because the interview process is kind of an artificial environment, and people make judgments there that don't really match what's going to happen in their actual work environment. But I look at what I call head, heart, and briefcase. And so does the behavior traits match the requirements of the job? That's the head part. Do their personal values and chemistry and cultural fit, make sense in relation to the client? And I know that's something you guys do a great job of really understanding the culture and the client, and then making sure that the candidates are going to match and fit into that culture. And I've seen that work out really well. And then the briefcase, is of relative value depending on the role that you're going to put somebody in, right? Because in sales, for example, it's almost all head and heart, and you can teach anybody the products or the services and those kind of things. But if they don't have the head and the heart match for sales, the briefcase doesn't really matter. But the briefcase is their experience, their certifications, their training, their skill sets that they bring with them. Those are all important, but it's of relative importance. And the other thing is thinking ahead, looking ahead about not just hiring for the current role, but hiring for the future too, right? And probably, 70-30 is kind of the breakdown, that 70% of the time you're hiring for the current role, but about 30% of the time you want to be thinking about where this person could go down the road, because I got to get a succession system in place, and I got to get prepared for the future, and I need people that are going to develop. So they may not match the initial role, but they will match a future role really well. And if you can help them be successful in the current role, then you get them ready for that.
No, that makes total sense. Go ahead, Frank.
I was going to say, then, in promotion is, to me, is just like hiring. It's really like you're hiring somebody again for a new role. And when you're promoting somebody, you got to really understand that new role, and don't promote them just based on what they've done in the past. And at Longview Fiber, that's what I did. I inherited this whole organization that mostly had been promoted into leadership positions based on what they had done before. So you had the best operator becoming the supervisor, or the best salesperson becoming the sales manager. And in my mind, that's three mistakes in one move, right? Where you lose your best operator or your best salesperson, You may create a kind of a mediocre or lousy foreman or sales manager, and you make everybody else mad that has to work for this person because what they do, their style of managing is going around and tell everybody how they used to do it. And that nobody really wants to hear that. They want help in how they're going to do it, right? And so don't look backwards when you're promoting somebody. It's got to be looking forward to see how are they going to fit that new role. And they may not be the best at what they were what they've been doing. That's okay. And you got to be clear with everybody that we're not going to promote just the best operator to the supervisor. That's not how this works, right? We're going to promote the best potential supervisor who may be an okay operator, and so you just be ready for that. And now
No,
companies have had to deal with how do they, if we do that, now how do we recognize the best operators, right? So they had to create a system for recognizing and rewarding, performance on a technical aspect of business as opposed to just promotion into a leadership role, right? Used to be that was the only path there was, and so you had to promote people that shouldn't be there. That was the only way to recognize them. Now they've created some, senior operators, operator 2, 3, 4, more pay, bigger equipment responsibilities, those kind of things that you can reward people with without actually putting them in a position that doesn't take advantage of their strengths. So,
no, that makes total sense. And again, every situation is different. And I think you bring, like what we said at the very beginning, this holistic approach into your consulting and helping to guide. When you're looking for an ideal client, who is that?
yeah, so it's not size so much. I mean, I have a I have a client that's about an $8 million a year client. I have one that's a $700 million a year client. So size is not really, it's more complexity is what I look for, either complexity of products or services or customer base, markets that they're in, those kind of things that, because that's where the cash generation mechanisms of the business are harder to see in those complex situations. And you got to get in there and figure out which ones are positive, which ones are negative. And that's what I'm good at, is getting in there and figuring that out. And it's not just gross profit or margin. That's not the answer. It's really the cash generation from each product and service over, say, a year. And the same with the customers. You got to really look at that. So people get caught up in, it's a high margin customer, a high margin product. Well, yeah, but we don't sell many of them. So it, over the period of a year, it doesn't really do much for us, right? So, uh, and so that, I think that's the main thing, is to help customers or clients structure their business that is going to be the most highest generating cash business, and then make sure the right people are in the right places to sustain that. Because it doesn't do me any good to do a good project and then leave and things go back to the way they were. That doesn't help my reputation at all, and it doesn't help the client at all, and they get disappointed. So that's where that fit that you guys do so well with. That's where that really comes into play, is to sustain the improvements and build on that. My expectation when I'm done with working with a client is they keep moving and progressing and improving. They don't just stop where we were when I left. That doesn't help us.
Absolutely. No, Frank, I think this is really good information. And I wanted to ask about your clients because, again, as people are listening, all of your contact information will be listed, and I've seen it firsthand. And I think the other amazing thing is your toolbox. It's not, here's what I do in this set thing. It's so customized to that client and able to bring out, this hammer is needed here versus a screwdriver. You're not gonna,
Right.
screw in a nail with a hammer, or I kind of said that wrong, but you got what I meant.
Yeah, sure did. Yeah,
Yeah,
I try and come in neutral, always, and leave my toolbox sort of at the side and wait until I really think I understand the situation better. And as you said earlier, every situation is different. Every culture is unique. That their ability to absorb change is different. The approach you got to use with them. Sometimes it's straight on hit them over the head. Sometimes it's a lot more subtle. So you have to figure all that out up front in order to be effective, and then bring out the tools that really match the situation. And yeah, so that's the approach I try and take, is to stay neutral until I really think I understand and then I take that understanding to the client and say, here's what I got so far, how am I doing? And then they can help confirm or adjust your perception a little bit for that. Because sometimes you see things, you think you understand them and you don't, and that's okay. You got to say, hey, I got that one wrong, it's fess up right away and then adjust your approach accordingly.
Absolutely. No, Frank, this has been fantastic. And I really do appreciate you and your time and your approach. And I highly do recommend you and others to reach out to you because, again, it's that people, processes, and technology all in one and looking at things strategically, what makes sense, what makes you money,
Yeah,
and how do we move forward. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time and your insights.
you bet. It was my pleasure. Thank you. And I look forward to keep working with you on various occasions going forward.
Perfect. Awesome. Frank McShane, Square Peg Consulting. Thank you.